Concept Show, exclusive to the Paranormal UK Radio Network. Now, once again, it's me and my dulcet tones opening the show because our lovely Paul Rook is sick and poorly and dying in bed at the moment. So we send him all our lovely healing thoughts to him, and hopefully he'll return soon with his very sardonic sense of humour. But I am joined in the studio by the usual Mr. Stupendously, amazingly wonderful Richard Clements. Hello, Richard.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Oh, I do like the introduction this week. Yes.
Much better than Boy Wonder.
Oh, yes, of course it is. Of course it is.
Making up for all those weeks you got called Boy Wonder.
I was just looking online earlier and I saw you online and I saw you were surrounded by brand new shelving. What have you been up to?
Yeah, I've just done my crystal room out with brand new shelving, and believe it or not, I still need another shelving unit in there. But yeah, I've had so much fun sorting out, finding all my crystals because they're all in boxes. So my online shop is a lot better organised now, and I can pinpoint my showcases for a topic. Because, I like to bring information as well as try and sell crystals. So you know what you're buying and how to use it. So often you get sold a crystal and you go, oh, yeah, it's good for this. And then you forget the minute you walk out the door. So I thought it would be really good to do that. So I'm really pleased with that.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to say I'll be round next week anyway at some point, I think. And, yeah, I look forward to seeing it.
Yeah, it's looking amazing, and the energy feel out there is fantastic. So I'm very happy girl right now. And I'm even happier because we were on the downward slope to Halloween.
Oh, yes. It's that time of year. I must admit, I was out today, nothing to do with Halloween, but I was just catching the last rays of summer, I think. We've got a little bit of sunshine today, which has been a bit unusual this summer in general, actually. So I was just catching the last rays, and yeah, the nights are really drawing in. We change the clocks next week, don't we? So, yeah, it will be, we will have the feel of Halloween.
We certainly do. And it's a perfect time to sit indoors in your nice, cozy little house with a really scary movie or a really good book in front of you, right?
Oh, of course it is. Of course it is.
And you've got to read a scary book.
I'm talking about books.
Now, we've had our guest today is phenomenal. He's a prolific writer regarding all ghosts and spirits and paranormal occurrences, and was actually at the centre of one of the best known and fantastically documented cases of South Shields Poltergeist. But he's written another book that's just literally hot off the press. It's Mr. Darren Ritson. Good evening, Darren. How are you?
Hello there, Kerry and Richard. Yes, I'm fine. Thank you very much. Thanks for having me on the show again.
Oh, no, it's fantastic.
It's a pleasure.
Somebody who, as we had you on the last show, we talked very extensively about the South Shields Poltergeist case and being part of that case and what that actually was about for you. In regards to research, it's very SPRASAP kind of methodology behind your investigation there, wasn't it?
It certainly was. I think that's potentially the only way to go, to be honest, to be methodical and skeptical and scientific as well, as much as we can be scientific as we can, to try and document what it is that was going on. Obviously, it's pointless just going in just willy-nilly and just enjoying the ride and not getting anything out of it. For a case that we realised was going to be as big as what it was, we had to try and get it right, because we only had one crack at it, really, because you just never know when you're going to get another gigantic, big case like this one. So we had to give it our best. And fortunately, like I say, I had Mike Halliwell with me as well on the investigation, and he was like a seasoned researcher anyway. He'd been on the block a few times, so I got him involved, and we managed to investigate the case the way we did, and the way it worked out. I think we obviously did something right, because it's received a lot of good praise from a lot of the world's leading psychical researchers.
Yeah, yes. I've actually seen. I've seen a lot of write-ups about your books, and I'm quite surprised at the people who have actually written sort of like an about your book. But you say, I suppose dealing with a poltergeist, I mean, that is sort of like the holy grail of a lot of paranormal researchers to actually get a poltergeist
It
case.
is.
And you managed to actually do this. But I suppose once you identify you've got a poltergeist or you're dealing with a poltergeist, the clock is ticking, isn't it? Because because it is quite well known, because they are a time-related sort of phenomena, isn't it?
Well, it is. It is. And by the time I got first involved with it, the case had actually been, well, the poltergeist had actually been quite active for a good few months at that particular point. So when I was first conducting the interviews with the lady in question who lived at the house, from what she was telling me, some of the phenomena that had been documented, it had poltergeist written all over it, to be honest. But I didn't really want to turn around and say, this is what you've got, without actually visiting the house and exploring it for myself first. But I did, however, turn around and say, it sounds like this is what you've got. And based on the fact that it had been going for so long, I tried to reassure her by saying things like, well, by the sounds of it, it seems like it could be reaching its peak, because these things are relatively short-lived anyway. This had been going on for about 6 months by the time, well, 5 or 6 months by the time we got involved. So we were of the opinion that it was more or less over, and we were going to maybe either get in just for the end, maybe hopefully see one or two things towards the end. We thought we'd sort of been called in at the tail end of it, but as it transpired, it just kept going on and on and on, and it was ramping up, and it was getting bigger and more intense, and eventually we went in, and it just went from there. It just continued on for another 5 months or so. It went from about, well, December 2005 it started. We went in, I was contacted in June 2006. In July 2006 is when we made our first visit. And we kept on visiting and helping and assisting in documenting and being bewildered completely up until about the October of 2006. So it was just under a year that it went on, this horrendous infestation. I say horrendous, but it was also bloody brilliant as well. To see stuff like that it was just, like you see, every investigator's dream, really, isn't it, to get a big
I
case.
suppose if you're dealing with somebody, a family, you know, you must be reluctant to use the word poltergeist, because that must have a lot of overtones, because a lot of people who are not sort of used to them or don't quite know what they are will probably sort of just switch to the Hollywood version, because you don't want to.
Well, we discussed all that as well, and we were talking about all different sorts. This is obviously when we went in. We were explaining what a poltergeist was and what it did and how long they usually last. And then they were saying, well, this one's went on a little bit longer than normal. And then we were saying, well, yes, so likelihood is you haven't got much to worry about, because it'll eventually taper off soon and go. And it got to the point where Mike and I were just looking at each other and we were just thinking, blooming heck, when is this thing going to end? It just seemed to go on and on and on. But yeah, it was quite phenomenal, to be honest. And it fell into me lap, to be honest. Like the case fell into me lap. There was a colleague at work who just approached us after she'd had her lunch, and she went, "Oh, my friend's daughter's got a ghost," and it just went from there. Could have went to anybody, but I'm so glad it came to me, because I'd like to think we did a good job, and then we reported the case to the SPR, and then the case then got looked into by Alan Murdy, and he checked our evidence and stuff like that. So I think there could have been a large chance of it falling into one of the many teams out there that could have come in and they could have made a right hash of it. They could have just uploaded all the stuff, like the anonymity of the family might have been compromised. So without trying to blow me on trumpets like too much, I think the case fell into the right hands.
I agree.
I'd like to think that it did, but well, obviously it did.
I do actually agree with you. I think, but then I also think the universe puts the right people in the right place at the right time as well. And you was obviously that person at that particular time and with that particular mind as well.
Yeah.
Because you weren't automatically jump into the hashtag it's a demon, hashtag it's a ghost assumption. You were in observing, talking, getting to know the people that it was involved with, and just documenting what was going on and reassuring while it was. And I just think it was brilliant. We talked quite extensively last time you were on the show. So, guys, if you want to listen, you'll have to go back into the archives. We'll share that on our page again so you can listen a bit more. But you would also have to buy the book that Darren wrote off the back of that. Darren, where can people buy the South Shields Poltergeist book?
Well, the best place to get it really would be online. W.H. Smith's, the History Press, that's the publisher that's published it. They've got a website. You can get it direct from them. Most people shop on Amazon. You can get it on Amazon, or you can get it on Amazon.com. So it's available in America as well. Or any good bookshop, I suppose. There's lots of bookshops out there, but not so many people go out and about shopping these days. Everybody's confined to their homes, and you're not allowed to go here and you're not allowed to go there. So everybody just shops online. So I would say, yeah, Amazon's probably the best place.
Off the back of this particular situation, you're I would say you're a researcher more at heart, aren't you?
Yes, I love researching, digging up archives and looking through books and trawling and seeing if I can find parallels here and information there, and seeing what I can learn from lots of different other cases, and then comparing it with me. Funnily enough, there's a little bit of extra research going on at the moment. I've got two parapsychologists from the United States who I'm working with at the moment in relation to the evidence, the data, the recordings, some of the film footage that we've got from South Shields, and there's a paper being prepared as we speak for a peer-reviewed academic journal. We're not 100% certain which one it is, but we're hoping, I think it could be the Society for Psychical Research. So yes, the information we've gathered from South Shields has come in handy for evaluation and then comparison again with other cases, and see what can be gleaned and what can be learned from it. So yes, research, it isn't all about running around in the dark at night and coming home frightened and suffering what people call nowadays is a paranormal hangover. Have you ever heard of one of them?
Oh,
Yeah,
right,
we
yeah.
love the paranormal
I've
hangover.
had many of them before, which I normally find like a cup of tea with a couple of sugars and a cigarette at the back door would normally fix. It's normally after you wake up, after being up for 24 hours or whatever it is. But yeah, I mean, there's obviously more to it than creeping around in the dark and having fun, which didn't get us wrong. I love doing that as well. That's quite fantastic. But again, after the investigation, you get back, you've got your data, research, look at your data and try to get some sort of make head nor tail of it, if you know what I mean. But yes.
So when we talk data, what kind of things are we looking at there?
Well, out of all the stuff that I've submitted for analysis, there's things like sound recordings, little clips of footage, things going on, stuff like that. A lot of the data that these two parapsychologists are collecting are like information from investigators as well. So like we've been asked to fill out forms, like questionnaires, like how you felt, all that kind of stuff. What state of mind you're in, what state of mind were the family in, did the family suffer this, did they suffer that, were they diagnosed with this? So there's a lot of information being collated as well, not just the information we collated at the time, but information that's been collated afterwards in regards to the family in question. Did they have any sort of mental issues? Did they have any sleep problems? All this sort of stuff's been looked at, and it's all been evaluated and put together in a report, and then that's being sort of compared to other cases where they've got data filed away for that, and then all the data is going to be looked together and what conclusions might be drawn or ideas might be put forward as to what on earth could be going on. And it's what I'm quite pleased about is when I first started submitting some of the data. Of course, this data that I've sent over it's all sort of professionally done, if you know what I mean, i.e. there's been waivers signed, and the first thing that I questioned was, right, I'm going to send you some information, but you have to promise that, you know, the names of the family members and stuff like that won't be divulged. But of course,
Yeah.
they're professional in their manner, and they have ethics, and they're up there in the top. Basically, I'll give them a shout out. I'll tell you who it is. It's Dr. James Horan. Have you ever heard of James Horan? He's from I think he's from Texas, and he's like I'm going to use the demon word, yeah, but he's a demon when it comes to like peer-reviewed academic journal papers. He's printed. He's had hundreds published, and he's a really well-respected parapsychologist. And part of his team, there's a lady called Cindy Little, and she's in the US as well. And the three have been working together with this. So when the article comes out, or when the paper comes out, obviously I'll have my name on it, but I've done what I felt I could do for them. You know what I mean? Like whenever they've turned around and said, could you compile a list of this? Could you make a list of that? Tell me what type of phenomenon went on you. Write a synopsis of the case, etc. I've done whatever I could. These guys, however, these are doing the analysis and the hard work. Basically, they're doing the academic stuff.
Yeah,
if you know what I mean. But obviously, they couldn't do any of it without any of the information that I've given them. So when I first started sending it out to them, you know, sending the film footages and little bits of clips and stuff like that, I think Cindy was quite impressed. She was like, I can't believe how much you've given her, how much data there is. We've got absolutely loads to get our teeth stuck into. This is the data I should mention that, inverted commas, doesn't exist.
Yeah, this is the private stuff that is and should remain like private and confidential to protect the family that was involved with it, right?
Well, this is why a lot of people say it doesn't exist, is because I haven't just posted it all over the internet, and I haven't just given it to anybody willy-nilly, and we had to be really selective about what we could show at the time when the case came out and stuff like that. But a lot of accusations came as, where's this data? I haven't seen this. It should be there for everybody to see. And I was saying, well, under normal circumstances, if the family was behind it and they wanted to be named, we could do this, no problem. But because we are protecting the family and the anonymity of the family, we have to be a little bit more careful in what sort of information we give out, because a lot of the information, a lot of the video footage, and it identifies them by name, by face. So we kind of just put it out there, you see. So this is when it comes to really having the footage and the data analysed, this is why I had to be really careful before handing it over. I had to be 200% certain that the anonymity was going to be protected, which it has been. Obviously, the likes of James Horan and Cindy Little, they've got reputations to protect, as well as I've got a reputation as well, which I want to keep intact.
Yes.
I don't want to goof that up in any way, shape or form. If I was to just send footage here, there and everywhere, which might compromise their anonymity, it'll be a case of, well, we don't want him to investigate, because if he says he's going to do something, he'll do the opposite.
Yeah. Credibility and integrity.
Yeah. First and foremost, the protection of the family was paramount, and that's why it's took so long. I mean, it's been 15 years now. I mean, Alan Murdy took some of the footage away. Alan Murdy, very well respected member of the paranormal community, very high up in the Society for Psychical Research. You could trust Alan Murdy. You can give him all the information. He's not going to go away and tell everybody who the family is. Likewise with James and Cindy. So I've had to be really careful over the years who to think about giving this information to. I know 200% that nobody's going to find out who the family is, and it's not going to end up in the public domain. Now, what I'm pleased about is that this article hopefully will be published. We're hoping the GSPR, if it goes in there, and then if anybody ever turns around and says, well, there isn't any information, you haven't got any data, there's no evidence, it's all a load of rubbish, well, I can say, well, actually, can I refer you to the Journal of Society for Psychical Research, issue this, 2010, where the first reviews went in, and then the new review in 2021, hopefully if it gets published this year, or it could be next year by now. By the time the article gets sort of peer reviewed and it gets edited and like made, publication ready, it's likely going to be next year now. So at least you can say, well, there is evidence. There's proof of the evidence. It's been evaluated. It has been looked at. I mean, like I said, there's been a lot of people that have actually said that the case isn't as good as what they say it is because the investigators refuse to share that evidence and have it sort of academically reviewed. But that's totally not the case. It's actually happened on 2 occasions now. So there you go. I'm just chuntering on and waffling. I forgot the main point. This is always the case. When I get started, you cannot shut us up.
Oh, that's good because that makes you a great guest for us. Now, off the back of that case, you went on, didn't you? And you researched further and more. You went deeper, didn't you, into poltergeist and various topics off the back of that. So I want to come away from the South Shields, particularly because we covered it quite extensively in the last show.
Yeah,
and if people want to know, they can go back, listen to the show, and go and buy the book. Is the point, right? It's not all Hollywood when you get a poltergeist, is it? First of all, it's can be very subtle. Do you not think? To start with,
it can. But I think in relation to our case, it was more subtle when we weren't there. We sort of went in just as it was getting started, if you know what I mean. Had we have been involved from the very beginning, we might have decided that it was, this is potentially low level. This, there's not much going on. There's a little bit here and a little bit there. But by the time we come in, it had been sort of slowly developing over a few months, you see. So by the time we went in, it was just ready for the main show, if you know what I mean. It was
full-blown poltergeist activity, folks.
Yeah. I wished I'd been there from the very outset. I really do. But like I say, we could only get invited in when we got invited in. By the time they actually realised something was really untoward and was starting to get really frightened, all their months had sort of elapsed. A little bit here, a little bit there, and you know what I mean.
Yes.
So we were kind of lucky. That's why we're saying we think when we were going to go in and get the tail end of it, but we didn't. We were extremely lucky in the fact that it was not just getting started, but it was actually beginning to ramp up and get more intense.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
So you wrote the South Shields Poltergeist, and then you followed it up with a second book called Contagion, didn't you?
Yes, Contagion in the Shadow of the South Shields Poltergeist. That was what publication that we had done in 2014. It came out. Funnily enough, we had that written by the end of 2010, I do believe, beginning of 2011. But it never actually came out until 2014. We sort of held back for a number of reasons. But it's like a continuation on, but it's more like an investigation into, well, does what it says on the tin, contagion. Basically, there was a few examples of contagion that we experienced at South Shields, which got me thinking. Because I remember thinking at the time, I remember many years ago, I read a book. Well, there's 2 books in particular which spring to mind. There's Guy Playfair's This House is Haunted, where Maurice Grosse and Guy Playfair experienced a couple of odd incidences away from the main poltergeist-infested house. We call it the primary infestation site. But I'm not going to give that an acronym because that'll be quite rude. So we'll call it the primary infestation site. And when Guy and Maurice were investigating the Enfield case, a couple of spooky things happened away from Green Street, shall we say?
Yeah.
Okay. Right. And that's what sprang to mind, because we experienced a little bit of what we would call contagion at South Shields. But it also made us think of, there was a book in 1996 by two, that sort of, I think, retired investigators now, but they were big in that day, and they're really notable. John and Ann Spencer. I'm not sure if you've ever heard of them.
Yeah.
But they
Yes,
wrote
I've
a
heard
book
of
in
them, yeah.
'96 called the what's it called, the Poltergeist Phenomenon, an investigation into psychic disturbance. And I remember thinking back after South Shields, because we were talking about the Contagion, because there was a couple of events which I can go through. I know it's South Shields related, but Contagion events that Mike and I and a couple of others experienced got me thinking. John and Ann Spencer's book, they touch on the subject of contagion. So Contagion for me, I mean, it's not my invention, if you know what I mean. It's not my discovery. Here, look what we've discovered. We've discovered that this happens and that happens. It had been written up and documented before.
Mm-hmm.
But I wondered, and I actually said to Mike, I went, well, it's been touched upon, but just briefly. It's been made mention of. Someone's made a mention of it here. They've made a mention of it there. As if it's just in passing. So then they concentrate on what's happening at ground zero again. Ground zero, it's another term we've used for the primary infestation site, the haunted house, inverted commas, shall we say.
Yeah, yeah.
You know?
It's a progression. So basically what you're saying is what you've gone onto is a progression of other people's experiences. You know,
Yeah,
they've experienced that and you experienced that. So all you've done is, all right, you might not have put it out there straight away, but all they did was document that and you've progressed that, right?
basically, yes. They've
Yeah.
started something. They've made mention of it. And I've sort of cottoned on, basically, and I've said, well, you know, these guys have wrote about Contagion. Morrison Guy posed questions during the Enfield case. Something occurred at one place, which then transferred itself into the house at Green Street, and it was a remarkable similarity between two of the cases, where a box of matches at this house that Maurice Gross went to investigate. This was during the Enfield poltergeist as well. Towards the end of 1977, Maurice Gross went off to another poltergeist case, and he went with Mary Rose Barrington, a former member of the SPR. Sadly, she died, I think, in 2018 or 2019 or something like that.
Yeah.
She's not long passed over. But Maurice and Mary Rose Barrington went off to this place, and it was a case that was called Holloway in North. It was also in North London, and when they were there, this phenomena occurred. A box of matches sort of set itself on fire. Now, although all the matches were scarred and burnt, and the box was like more or less burnt to smithereens, the matches never actually ignited, if you know what I mean. So this box of matches just spontaneously combust. You know, the Holloway case I think it's actually known for like fire starting. There was a lot of fire starting going on. Now, this box of matches that had burnt and set ahead, basically, was an interesting sort of event, because, like I say, like, you know, the actual matches, you know, the sulfur on the end, they didn't actually burn. They didn't actually. So everything it burnt all around them. Anyway, they went back to the Enfield case, to the Enfield house, whilst they were doing them, and the exact same phenomenon happened there as well. A box of matches then burst into flames, in the exact same scenario. So we've got these amazing sort of parallels between cases as well, and that's the sort of thing we started getting interested in. We were looking at, well, could there have been contagion from one case going across to the Enfield? Do you know what I mean? So was a contagion from Holloway going across to Enfield, or did the Enfield fire begin because that it was its natural sort of progression? Because they'll go through all these stages, don't they, the poltergeist?
Yeah. So is it a poltergeist signature that every poltergeist case will have, or is there a crossover between cases? So it's like a different thing, isn't it? It's like, so if you've got like a poltergeist that then fits a certain remit, it'll go, like you say, it'll go through stages and then burn itself out. Excuse the pun there. Or whether or not it's got tendrils that branch out and affect other areas.
Well, yeah, that's the sort of thing we're like sort of trying to get our head around at the minute, because this, when you look at other poltergeist, see the new book is actually called Poltergeist Parallels and Contagion. The first book was Contagion in the Shadow of the South Shields Poltergeist. Basically, what I've done is completely refreshed it, and I've added loads of text to it. And it's been republished as Poltergeist Parallels and Contagion. Now, the unfortunate thing was when Contagion first came out in 2014, there was only a small number made. It was a small print run made. And due to unforeseen circumstances with the publisher, he couldn't sort of promote it and sell it because, you know, something private occurred within his family and he had to put his family first, which was fine. Absolutely, you know, everybody should put their families first. So basically, he brought all the books up for us and he's given to me. I've still got a huge pile of them at home, but there isn't that many out there. So the idea was, right, I think I'm going to try and update this book and have it republished. And I've got lots of new, fresh ideas, and I've got lots of stuff that I should have put in the first book that I didn't, which I wanted to put in the update. So over the last couple of years, I've been updating the book, and I've been adding chapters, and I've rejiggled all of the paragraphs, and there's 2 parts in the new book now. And the second part of the book is more evaluation and ideas and thoughts and theories, stuff like that. The first part of the book is what happened after South Shields, other cases we managed to get involved with, other parallels that were seen within them cases, spooky coincidences and weird little things occurring which had us scratching our heads thinking, hang on, we've seen this before. This is really, really relatively straight. And some of the parallels that were experienced was so, here's another match related pun, strikingly good. We were left scratching our heads thinking to ourselves, goodness me, I mean, it's as if we're still dealing with the same thing we left at Lock Street here. Has it come back? Has it come back to bite one in the butt? Or is it another poltergeist altogether? So we had all these ideas in my head. This is Mike and I, by the way, because we both did Contagion. And although I've updated Contagion and it's got my name on the front again, likewise with the South Shields Poltergeist 3rd edition, Mike took a step back. He's sort of, you know, he was sort of, what's the word I'm looking for? He was in ill, it's easy for me to say, isn't it? He's in ill health, if you know what I mean. His health started going downhill, and he found the new religion. He went across to Islam, and his ideas kind of changed. But that, on top of with the illness, forced him to step back. So I basically stepped forward and said, right, well, I'm going to update the books, and I'm going to try and take this forward. So yes, we both wrote the book, but it's me that's updated this new one. I've lost my train of thought again. Where was I? I'm sorry about that.
That's all right. Let's pull you back onto track then. So
Indeed.
So what were some of the incidences that you both experienced away from the ground zero of South Shields?
South Shields. Well, first, basically, if I can, before I go into that, I'll just explain just what Contagion is. Just for those that maybe it's a bit, I'll just sum it up in a paragraph, if that's all right.
Yeah.
Right. So Poltergeist Contagion, essentially, it's a process where the phenomena that normally occurs, like I say, at the ground zero or the primary infestation site, it can spread outward and affect those people around it, i.e. family members, friends, investigators, etc., etc. What we'll have to notice is, well, what we'll have to pay attention to is, or basically it's a small mercy. It's basically that those who are infected by Contagion, they don't suffer it to the same degree as what they would at the haunted house primary infestation site. As it spreads, we found it seems to become a little bit diluted. So, and it doesn't last as long, and it's not as intense. But we've also got to sort of determine here who can get infected, and because in a way it's like an infection. There's a lot of, if you look back in the literature as well, there's a lot of talk about the poltergeist followed such and such, and you know, a great example is the South Shields Poltergeist in Scotland. We've got Virginia Campbell. She was the young girl that was afflicted by this poltergeist in 1960. She had a lot of experience and a lot of phenomena occur in her house, and it was all getting too much. So what they decided to do was they decided to send her back to school. They said to school, it might give her a break from the poltergeist at home, and it might give her a little bit of normality. That was the plan. So she went to school. And when she was at school, poltergeist phenomena was reported there also at school. For example, like the desk on her lid was flipping up and down, and she was trying to fight with it. And you know, and the teacher was giving her funny looks, and she was saying, "Well, you know, please, miss, it's not me. This thing was going on." And the teacher also experienced a table lift up, turn around, and then move itself back to the ground. The teacher was looking for wires and things like that, and she couldn't find anything. So the poltergeist, a lot of people say the poltergeist was contagious in that respect because it went to the school with her. But in my personal view, that wasn't contagion simply because Virginia was the focus of the poltergeist. So wherever she is, it's going to be around her.
Mm-hmm.
So if she went down to the supermarket and things started flying off the shelves, the supermarket hadn't been infected because she was there. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. Because like they did the same with Janet, didn't they? At the infield, they sent her away for a respite, and they didn't have any problem at all.
Yes, there was nothing happening there. But again, when Janet went away to the hospital, if I remember rightly, nothing occurred when she was away either. But if you, for example, were at Soki in 1960, and you'd met Virginia, and then you came home, and then things started happening in your house, I would deem that as contagion because A, you don't live at the primary infestation site, and B, you're not the original focus. So somehow it's latched onto you, and it's went to your house.
Yeah, got you.
That's the difference between, I think, the poltergeist following the focus and somebody becoming infected.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, which would suggest then that in the Enfield case, Janet wasn't the focus.
Say that again, sorry?
It would suggest then that in the Enfield case, Janet wasn't the focus. Because she didn't experience anything when she was away from the house. It was either a person with a different focus in there, or it was the actual house itself that was the focus.
Well, or it could have just been that it infected somebody else, because in the book, there's quite a large section about the Green Street contagion. There was a lot of stuff experienced by a lot of other people who weren't Janet, who were away from Janet, where they experienced things in their house.
Yeah.
You know, so Janet could have been in a hospital bed getting her tests and things, and everything's all peaceful and quiet. But then again, if stuff was still happening at Janet's house, there is a theory about if it's the RSPK, then somehow it's just like residual RSPK. So when she disappears, the RSPK that's been left over is still a little bit active, a bit like dormant electricity in a battery or something like that. Sometimes you can turn a battery on, you know, like you can get a bit of residual light. You know, the battery's dead sort of thing. In that respect. But again, this is where it can get very complicated, and there's like loads of different potentials, little avenues to go down and investigate. But again, this is what I'm kind of hoping for in relation to the book. People may come and read the book and think, well, I think that's a load of codswallop. I think he's wrong here, and that's fine. That's great. If you think I'm wrong, and I don't mean to be sarcastic or funny, but it's like you go off and write a book, you go off and write a paper, and you tell me where I'm wrong. If you're telling me I'm wrong, that's great.
Yeah, back it up.
I've done what I wanted to do. I want to get the ball rolling here. I want to get this discussion underway, because over the years, although it's been mentioned here, there, and you know, a little bit here, a little bit there, make mention of it, no one's really actually spent any serious time looking into Contagion and thinking, hang on, this is an interesting sort of aspect of the poltergeist that's seldom been looked into. Everybody's more focused on ground zero, what's going on there. Oh, yes,
Yeah.
yes, it's spread over the road and something happened. Yeah. Oh, yes, but back at ground zero, this is where everything was happening.
Mm.
You know, it's kind of fell by the wayside. So again, when I was looking at them old books and I was having this conversation with Mike, I was saying, well, nobody's ever looked into this, so let's delve into it. Let's see what's going on here. And as we were getting stuck into other cases, like I say, this is where the second aspect of the book comes in. The parallels. We were experiencing all these parallels, and it just snowballed from there. But yes, South Shields. Let's go back to that. I'm doing that waffling thing again. Basically, that's what Contagion is. This is specified in the book as well. It's basically the stage 1, stage 2. There is a stage 3, but if you want to know what these stages are, you've got to buy the book. I'm not giving it all away.
No, I don't blame you. I've got it on pre-order. So
oh no, I don't mean you. I mean
no. Anybody who's
lovely
listening,
listeners.
yeah, definitely, all our lovely listeners. I have actually got the book on pre-order. I can't wait to receive it because I thoroughly enjoyed how you laid out the South Shields Poltergeist and found it incredibly refreshing, quite frankly, to read somebody that just dealt with the case and followed it through and put out transcripts of what happened and that. And I was researching Pontefract at the time, and I found it really useful when I was looking at that case, bearing in mind that's like 30, 40 years later. Do you know what I mean? To then go and try and follow it through from the alpha case and follow it through and back it up and do the research. And that I actually found it really useful. And as you know, I've been wanting to talk to you for years about this particular scenario, which I was lucky enough to do last time. So going back to the South Shields, this contagion aspect, let's focus on that away from the main case. What kind of examples can you give on that?
Right. Well, let's start with the flying book. That's the main one that most people know about. That was documented in the first book, and it's also talked about in this book as well. Basically, one morning in the summer of 2006, Mike and I, with a colleague called Jill, visited Lock Street, and we went there for the morning, and it was a very active morning. There was lots of things going on, etc., etc. Anyway, to cut a long story short, the end of that morning came and went. We left. I needn't go into what happened in the morning because we're talking Contagion now.
Yeah.
I need to go and get it. Anyway, so we got on the bus and we went back to Mike's house. And basically, once we got to Mike's house, we went into his little office area in his house and we turned the computer on and we started writing up our case notes and we were discussing things and we were trying to look for basically evaluating what had went on in the morning. We went to basically start writing things up. So we sat there and we were having a bit of discussion, and time got the better of her. We decided, right, it's time for a cup of tea, a cup of coffee. So we stood up and we left Mike's office area. Now, on the left, on the way in, which would have been on the right, on the way out, there was a big, sturdy bookshelf and packed with books. And on that bookshelf, there was a book called George B. Hodgson's The Borough of South Shields, which is, as described in the South Shields Poltergeist, it's not one of these sort of pamphlets that can be like blown away on a summer breeze. It's a big, thick, hardback book. It must weigh about £4. This huge, it's like a encyclopedia of the history of South Shields, basically, and it's a huge thing. Anyway, as we walk past the bookshelf to make our way into the kitchen for a cup of tea, we both heard this like weird sort of noise followed by this horrendous thump. We both sort of flinched and looked at each other in fright, and when we turned round, we saw that this book was on the floor. Somehow it had dislodged itself off the cupboard, off the bookshelf, and it wasn't teetering on the edge or anything like that. He was a tiny chap, was Mike Hallowell. There is, should I say, I'm talking about him in a past tense there. He was a tiny chap. This book was well and truly on the books. When we walked by, it wasn't it was ready to fall off, and it was sat in the middle of the floor. And at that point, I looked at Mike, and he looked at me, and I turned around and I says, going, Bennett, Mike, I hope I haven't brought anything back. And this is in the text in the book, actually. And it's actually true to the word. And he actually turned around and said, so do I, because Jackie will hit the roof, and that's Mike's wife. So we thought about it at the time, and we thought it was rather strange. But thinking back, it was a case of like, it was a classic case of like, we've brought something away with we here. It was a single one-off isolated incident which happened at Mike's on that day, after a morning of hellish activity at 42 Lock Street, which is obviously the pseudonym address we give to the house.
Yeah.
You know, that was just one example of that. There was another one. We had this media consultant stroke. She was a news reporter, and she kind of acted like a media agent for what she was, you know, for when we were promoting the book, and she was like writing articles for one, stuff like that. And she was called Natalie. Now, she lived in a house in London, and we'd sent her some footage that were deemed worthy of being able to send her. And she was viewing this footage one afternoon. She'd been reading the manuscript, having a look at this footage, and she'd finished with it. She turned her little camera off and put the book down, and she went out into the kitchen, opened a cupboard, and there was this big bag of lentils, which was again packed in the cupboard, and it sort of flew itself out of the cupboard, if you know what I mean. And then deposited all the lentils all over the floor, and which kind of shook her up, because yes, things can fall out your cupboard when you open it, but she was adamant that the lentils were like putting the cupboard nice, and you know, because you've got to ask these things. Say, well, were the noodles? What I keep calling them noodles for Pete's sake. The lentils sort of teetering on the edge again. So you know, did you have to hold the packet closed to get the door closed? Because then, of course, they were going to fall out when you open it. Which is, she was like, no. You know, they were in the cupboard. They flew out and they went all over the floor. But on top of that, when her and her husband were lying in bed on occasions, quite often they could hear the key in the door, the keys jangling, and there was someone trying to get in. And every time they got up and had a look, there was nobody in the house. There was nobody outside the house, which that kind of sort of rattled her. So we're thinking, well, this was just coincidentally, spookily, you know, after she was viewing the footage from our case, whilst the case was ongoing. So we found that like sort of jolly interesting, if you know what I mean. But
so this Contagion, you don't necessarily have to be involved physically. You could just be sort of right on the peripheral and just receive information like this journalist was doing, and she was having stuff going on. Yes.
Well, that's what we sort of classify as, I think it's stage 2 contagion, where the person that experiences a contagion doesn't actually have any contact at all with those at ground zero, and all they've got to do is to simply know somebody who has got contact with those at ground zero. You'll find it like interesting, I think, when you actually read the different stages and how we describe it. But we've come to this conclusion, if it is a conclusion. We've labelled these levels based on some of the experiences that we've had. So I mean, the next sort of example I can give you is a classic stage 2 piece of contagion, if you know what I mean, because the guy who again experienced the odd activity, all he had to do was know somebody who was involved with the case. He didn't even know there was a case going on at the time whilst he experienced something funny, and it was only because the link in the chain, so to speak, was Mike Hallowell. When Mike was involved directly with Lock Street, and this guy Danny knew Mike. And it's as if it's explained better in the book, but it's how these different links in the chains can be sort of, you know, how people can get affected. So we've categorized it, if you know what I mean. But it is actually fascinating. I'll give you the example. There was 2:00 in the morning one morning during the case. Mike's phone rang. He missed the phone call. he got up, he raced to the phone, missed it. Looked at his phone, at the screen, seeing the word Danny. Danny tried to call you. So he's wondering, I wonder what Danny wants at this time of the morning. Never thought anything of it. Mike woke up the following morning, so he picked up the phone and he decided to ring Danny. And he said, Mike, it's Mike, what did you want? What do you mean? He said, well, you phoned us through the night. No, I didn't. I went, yes, you did. I'm looking at my call log here. You phoned me 2 o'clock in the morning. He said, wait a minute, I'll just have a check. So Danny checked his phone. He's looking, thinking, yes, Mike, it appears I did phone you at 2 o'clock in the morning, but I didn't phone you at 2 o'clock this morning. I didn't personally ring you. So they were like, well, what's going on here? Weird. Mike was thinking it was a little bit weird anyway, but Danny hadn't a clue what was going on. As it happened, at that particular time, Mike was having trouble with his PC, and he wasn't getting things to work. Now, Danny's a bit of an IT specialist. He was a clever man. So he said, well, look, when I'm on the phone, will you come round and fix my PC? I've got stuff going on with it. Right, I'll come round and have a look. So Danny come round later on. Danny was looking at Mike's computer, and up on the screen, there was information about South Shields, the case and stuff like that. And Mike was explaining what it was that was going on. To be honest, Mike had received a file which then completely disappeared off his screen. And all it had on this file was, haha, this is another piece of Contagion. You see, which is weird. Mike was trying to retrieve it. So anyway, Danny had come round and he was looking at the computer. They got talking about South Shields. Mike had been explaining to Danny, right, this is what's happening, blah, 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 diddly-do, we've got a case on, it's a poltergeist, it's actually a big case, etc., etc., etc. At this point, it wasn't like a pseudonym thing at the time, you know what I mean? So Danny had said, oh, that's interesting, where is it? And he went, oh, well, it's at this place called Lock Street. And he went, Lock Street, where's that? Such and such. And he explained what it was. And Danny went, wait. And he went, 2 o'clock this morning, I was actually driving past the house at Lock Street. And that's when Mike got the phone call from Danny's car, which was sitting on the dashboard at the time. And we thought that was absolutely phenomenal. My hairs on my arms are like, they're like standing up on end. My goosebumps are going. Because Danny didn't even know there was a case going on at the time. So it's a hell of a coincidence that Danny just happened to be driving past the Lock Street house and his phone rang Mike. You know?
Yeah.
Mike was, I mean, Danny eventually did get involved with the case. There was a night called Grim Saturday that occurred. It was a night where everybody got together and there was this like ritual thing to try and quell it or whatever it was, at the behest of the family, I have to say. They were like literally like do anything to stop it. Danny came round and he partook in this sort of investigation with it. So he was eventually directly involved, but at the time his phone rang Mike's, he wasn't involved. He just happened to be driving past the Lock Street house.
Yeah.
Which we've classed as like a great example of like stage 2 Contagion.
Yeah.
He wasn't even involved. So that was another sort of, see, with all these things occurring, I was thinking to myself, like, see, after the case, it got me thinking of like the Enfield book and John and Ann Spencer's book, and I'm thinking they've talked about Contagion before, and now we can say that we've had some experiences within the South Shields case that we could deem as being contagious. This poltergeist seems to be spreading out and infecting those that get too close or those that become involved in some way. And we're thinking there's something fascinating here. So for the update of the book, I decided to try and search as many cases as I could to see if I could find other examples, other than Enfield and other than the ones that John and Ann Spencer were talking about. They make mention of a couple of cases. Like there was a case in Hertfordshire that they investigated personally where a bit of contagion was experienced, and I thought that was interesting. So I started looking around for other cases. And that's where it more or less started. As we were investigating other cases after South Shields, we were looking into the contagious aspect of it, and we were getting sort of buzzes, thinking like, oh my God, why hasn't anybody done this before? It's like I say, it's been touched upon only minorly, if you know what I mean. Is that a word? Minorly?
Yeah.
It's only been touched upon like to a limited extent, but no one's ever really majorly looked into it. The only person that I can say that's really, really put a bit of effort in is like a chapter in his book is an American chap called Barry Taff.
I know Barry.
Barry Taff, yeah. He's actually in his book Aliens Above and Ghosts Below, I think it's called. He's wrote a chapter on this, is it the San Pedro case, which I've actually written up and covered for the new book. And he experienced some incredible stuff like that.
Barry Taff, just if I'm thinking of the right person, was involved in the Exorcist, not the Exorcist, the Entity.
Yes.
The Entity case, wasn't he? Yes, that's right.
That's him. He's been around for a long, long time, investigating a lot of cases. And there was this American chap who I correspond with and talk to called Randy Liebeck, I think they call him. He contacted me and he said, hey, there's some interesting stuff here. He said, here's a case you want to look at. This is a case you want to look at. I find it interesting that it's, that you're looking into this. And that he pointed us in the direction of the San Pedro case. So I started reading up about that. And Barry actually calls it, it's a psycho virus. Not psycho as in like Norman Bates with a knife. Psycho as in like psychokinetic or some say, you know what I mean? So it's like a cross between psychokinesis and a virus related to psychokinesis, as if the RSPK can spread, if you know what I mean. So that's what he's termed it as, which I found absolutely fascinating. So I contacted Barry and I've said, great. And he said, yes, I'll send you a copy of the chapter and you can write it up, which I've done. And what I've basically done for the update is try to collate a whole load of other cases, which I've done, to basically try and satisfy my own curiosity that South Shields wasn't just a one-off, if you know what I mean. All these contagion phenomenon things just like spreading out. And I think, are we going nuts here? Did this happen? So then I'm going to look at other cases to see if it's happened there, because I'm sure it has. And I was right, and I've collated a whole number of cases and I've detailed them. And my whole point is to try and demonstrate that, yes, contagion does happen. And it again, it satisfies my own curiosity to say, well, at least I can now look back at South Shields and think, well, I know it's happened in other cases, so there's no reason why what we experienced could have been untoward or weird or precipitated by the poltergeist in some way. It's absolutely fascinating.
Yeah. Just so people are aware out there, RSPK means recurrent spontaneous psychokinesis.
Oh, yes.
So for our listeners out there, in case you're wondering what that is, that's what they class it as. And it adds a different theory to what a poltergeist could be.
Yeah.
Stop right there, because we've actually come to the end of the first half. Believe it or not. So I kind of ringing my bell, going, right, let's have a quick break. And before we delve into this side of things a little bit more deeper, take a breather, guys.
Hello, Harry Price here. If there's nothing me and my friends enjoy more here on the other side, it is to sit back and relax and listen to the Paranormal Concept Show, right here on the PAUK radio network. Broadcasting a plethora of interesting and informative content for all your paranormal needs. Find them across social media to keep up to date with forthcoming shows and all their other adventures. Hello, is there anybody there?
And welcome back to the Paranormal Concept Show, exclusive to the Paranormal UK radio network. Now, if you're listening before the break, well, amazing concept, new concept to the table that has been touched on before by a couple of other researchers, but not really investigated as its own special hypothesis, which Darren Ritson, who's in the studio with us, has taken and looked at in a lot more depth than previous investigators regarding the poltergeist phenomena. Now, you called it contagion. We've talked about, being infected and all the, they're very medical terms, actually, aren't they? It's like a virus.
Yes, well, I don't know if you've seen the front cover of the new book. There is a big biohazard logo on the front.
Yes, I saw that and I thought, oh, well, I wonder what this is all about.
Well, yeah, when I was thinking about the cover, I was thinking, see, I was toying with the idea of, them little blobby globule things where you've got these little things coming off, and it's like the virus under the microscope. I was thinking something like that. But I thought at the present time, at the present moment, there's a lot of people sadly passing away with the COVID-19 and all that sort of stuff. I thought to myself, maybe it's a bit not unethical, but it's a little bit wrong to and plus I didn't want to be seen as like trying to sort of
cash in on the situation we've got around.
That's the last thing I wanted, because that's just very, very wrong, and it's sad what's happening, and there's lots of people losing their lives sadly. So whatever think about, but I thought the biohazard logo, funnily enough, one of my favorite films, it's called 28 Weeks Later in Robert Carter.
That is awesome film.
It's a big biohazard logo on the front of that, and it's all to do with the rage virus and how people can be affected and stuff like that. And I thought to myself, well, people can get infected in relation to poltergeist cases. Barry Taft's chapter about San Pedro is actually called A Hazardous Haunting. In other words, you go and investigate a poltergeist, you're putting yourself in harm's way potentially, because they can be quite dangerous things. You can get infected by. And I thought, well, people are biological. We're biological entities. And we can be infected and stuff like that, and poltergeists are a hazard. So I thought, well, the biohazard sign might be a good little logo to put on the front. So that's what we did.
And it's not misleading either. Some people might have picked up the Contagion book thinking it's actually something about something it's not.
Well, that's true. But again, that's the title of the book, Poltergeist, Parallels and Contagions. We've made sure that the title is in big bold letters.
Yeah.
So if anyone picks up the book and sees that, the first thing they're going to see is Poltergeist, Parallels, Contagion. So they're going to know it's about the poltergeist. But the opening stages of the book, we do actually go into the medical side of things. Basically, but we talk about diseases and microbes, and we talk about infections and how we're all understand and we're all sort of familiar with, and we're happy to accept the fact that contagion does occur in a medical sense. How like viruses can be spread from person to person. You pick up a glass, you have a drink of it, you can catch something. You can sneeze into the atmosphere, and then you can breathe it, and it can spread from one person to another, etc., etc. So when you look at that sort of idea of contagious diseases, nobody argues with the fact that it's a reality. But if you then take a walk on the spiritual side of things, and you start looking at things in the land of, is it metaphysical, I think they call it. If you take a walk in the metaphysical side of things, like like the spiritual side of things, it's like you'll find that sort of concept isn't as much accepted at all by mainstream science, well, as is the poltergeist in itself, to be honest. So, but there's no reason why it can't occur in a similar sort of way. There's mechanisms to it. There's my point I'm trying to get across here is that it does happen, that it does occur. Poltergeists can be infectious, in the same way that diseases can be infectious and they can spread from person to person. Likewise, if you get too close to a poltergeist, a good cracker of a poltergeist, you know what I mean? Then there's every chance you can take a little bit away of it with you. During the break, I was discussing a few comments I'd put in the beginning of the book, and these were like sort of quotes from other researchers in the past. And John and Anne Spencer more or less say that. They say there's no doubt about it. Those that find themselves investigating poltergeists can sometimes take a little bit away with them. And again, that clearly happens. But then we also discuss there's theories and ideas about different types of infection, if you know what I mean. There's certain ways of how the poltergeist can sort of precipitate whatever the poltergeist is, how it can precipitate and, you know, initiate contagion. Like in our physical normal world, we were saying before, that there's a few types of contagion. You've got active contagion and you've got passive contagion. Now, we all know what passive contagion and active contagion is, I presume, but I'll just briefly go over it.
Yeah, please.
Passive contagion would be if I go to a pub, say, for example, and the barman hasn't washed the glass properly, and, you know, some guy's had a drink and he's got hepatitis, something like that. He gives me the pint. I take a drink out of the pint glass. I end up contracting this disease. Nobody's done it on purpose. Nobody's done it in an untoward way. It's been passed on to me passively without any sort of ill idea behind it, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
That's quite passively. Again, if somebody sneezes in an empty room and then I walk into that empty room and I don't know about it, and the microbes are floating in the air, I could breathe them in. Again, I could be infected, but I've been infected passively because the person who sneezed might have left the room and he's got no intentions of trying to infect me. Passive contagion, well, basically, yeah, that's what that is. Active contagion is a bit different. That's deliberately infecting someone. There's some sad cases. We'll mention this in the book. There's sad cases where people have been taken to court because they've deliberately infected somebody with something. Say, for example, the HIV virus.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
HIV. Somebody knows that they've got it, and people will sleep with other people knowing that they've got it, and they'll pass on, you know, their bodily fluids or whatever, and then they'll deliberately infect someone. There has been court cases where people have been sort of prosecuted because it's tantamount to like manslaughter, really, especially when it comes to a killer disease like that. If I deliberately know that I've got it and I'll deliberately sleep with someone who hasn't got it, I'm actively infecting them. So there's two different types of sort of contagion. And in the book as well, we'll actually look at, in relation to poltergeists, what type of contagion could it be? Could it be active? Could it be passive? If it is active, it would insinuate that whatever's behind the contagion is sort of sentient and is doing it on purpose. So why is it doing it on purpose? I don't want to give too much away because it's absolutely fascinating. But in a nutshell, we do discuss the types of contagion. We look at terminology that we employ when we put this book together, like with different stages of contagion, stage 1, stage 2, and we give examples. And again, we'll look at like passive contagion, active contagion, and we'll compare it to like sort of medical scenarios, and we'll talk about, you know, like the poltergeist scenarios and why would it effectively sort of infect someone, what's its purpose, what's its gain. And it all boils down to it doesn't all boil down to, it's the way the evidence comes across from the findings, from what we've looked at, right? It gives the idea that potentially the poltergeist could be some sort of sentient, active being, if you know what I mean.
Like an intelligent spirit.
Intelligence, that's the word I'm looking for, yes. Some sort of intelligent, I don't know what. Let's say let's mention the dreaded D word. Is it a demon? Is it an entity of some sort? But there's different theories. In the back of the book, in the new sort of conclusion area thing where I've rejiggered it, because I'm not going to nail me flag to the mast here. I'm not going to say the poltergeist is this or the poltergeist is that. I'm going to hold my hands up and tell the reader at the end of this book, I still don't know exactly what the poltergeist is. But from the research we've done, from what we've looked at, it could favour the side of some sort of intelligence. You know what I mean? Well,
yeah.
But I don't know what type it is. If it's not a demon and it's not sort of anything else, like a deceased spirit, or if it's not a demon, then if it is intelligent, just what on earth could it be? And there's a theory we've put in to explain that as well. But again, I'll briefly go into it. There's an idea and there's a theory that the poltergeist could sort of start off as RSPK, angst, anxiety that comes from within a person. They cannot express it in the normal way, so they like sort of produce this psychic temper tantrum. After a while, the theory is that this RSPK, this bottled up whatever it is that's in a person, can then somehow develop, it unattach itself, and then it's got free reign. So it's
like a tulpa.
Like a what? Sorry.
Like a tulpa.
Yeah, something along those lines. But again, that's been suggested before in the past. I think D. Scott Rogo, he's an American parapsychologist. He's wrote something along the lines of that. But I've been studying his work, and I've been looking at William Roll's book as well, and they've got these ideas. And I've been reading what they've been saying, and I've been thinking, well, that makes sense. But what if? So I've wrote that up, and I've put my tuppence worth in, and I've said, well, he said this and he said that, and it could be this and it could be that. So the section at the end of the book is just like a huge free-for-all of ideas and theories, and what it is, and could it be this, could it be that. Here's the book. Go away and enjoy it. Please take it forward. We get the clever people involved, i.e. the academics, the parapsychologists.
Yeah, I agree. Get the clever people involved. Yeah,
and say, look, I've started something here. Off you go and not
run with it.
Because I'm no way clever enough to even start thinking about the science behind Contagion and RSPK, and I can just note down what I observe. I do get ideas and I do get theories. They may be far out. They may be good. They may be rubbish. That's not for me to decide. I'm just saying, like, yeah, here's the ideas. Go away and play with them, please. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. So we've got two very different theories at the moment on the table. We've got one that is like the tulpa thought form scenario, which we have looked into in a past show on this particular podcast. And we've got Guy Leon Playfair put out that it was a spirit that took the energy and basically played with it.
Yeah.
So it's like an externalization of an internal process going on one hand, and then on the second hand, that there is something out there that's extra that we can't see, that is around, that takes the energy we put out there possibly and plays with it and causes this phenomena. He sort of discussed that in regards to the Enfield. And then you've got, what is it exactly? We don't know, but not every case is the same. Poltergeist does seem to follow a particular pattern, but when you start breaking them down, you go, okay, so that particular case might be psychokinetic, that case might be this case might be that. It doesn't always seem to fit the remit of what everybody seems to use Enfield as, like the benchmark, that's the word I'm searching for, of how a poltergeist should be. But when you look at different cases, that's not necessarily the case. That, in fact, it's not the case at all. It's very, very different, and there are varying theories out there. And then off the back of that, like Darren suggests, don't just look at the alpha case. Look at the externals, the people that were around it, how it was, whether or not people in the family were being affected, whether the investigators were being affected, external to that particular case, because that's fascinating to me. This idea of an infection, to use the term, that's fascinating to me. I think, this is just an area, like you say, people focus too much on the alpha case and don't look at the whole. It's like when you look at a landscape and you've got like a focal point on the landscape of, say, the Eiffel Tower, but you miss everything around the Eiffel Tower. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
You're sort of like led directly to it, aren't you? Whereas you're missing quite a fair bit of the picture.
Yeah. And those people that are involved in that picture, the people on the Eiffel Tower having that alpha experience, but the people around are also enthralled and being affected by that big monument that's right in front of you in some way, shape or form. It's a different analogy without using the medical terminology, to maybe explain to people that concept of what this is. Fascinating. So when you go back to active and passive infection, do you have, or did you find examples of both?
Right, let's think about this. Off the top of my head, I've got to be honest, I can't actually remember.
Right.
It's likely that we have, and we did, otherwise we wouldn't have made mention of it in the first place.
True.
But off the top of my head, I'm struggling to remember something. Yeah, I guess you'll just have to buy the book.
Yes. Yes, we'll have to read the book on that one.
There will have been active and passive sort of incidences, but again, when we're talking active and passive as well, we're talking about when we're putting our idea together and our theory, we're putting together a hypothesis as to like what could potentially explain it. And when we're talking about, we're saying, could active contagion exist without passive? Could passive contagion exist without active contagion? What comes first? We discovered in the early days that the passive contagion might start off at first, but then if it develops into a full sentient thing, then active contagion will take over. However, if it's sentient from the start and it's not, so that it hasn't developed into something sentient, if it's like an intelligence from the start, then it's likely that there will be active contagion initiated from the beginning. But then we start talking about why would it want to spread out and infect as many people as it could, and we've come up with an idea about that as well. But that's all about basically its desire to survive, and that's what one of the chapter titles is called, the desire to survive. But obviously I didn't want to give away too much, but in a nutshell, if you look back at poltergeist histories, a lot of the cases you'll find that in a way that people sort of like advise victims of poltergeist and say, try not to get your fear up, try not to get your fear. The more frightened that you are, the stronger the poltergeist will get. It's as if the poltergeist feeds on fear. You know what I mean? And it draws from your fear. It can pick up your fear because, these sort of senses can be, you can walk into a room and you can cut the atmosphere with a knife. There's been an argument before you even, that type of thing. So fear can be sensed as well, potentially. I mean, don't quote us on this. You might get scientists out there who beg to differ. But like I say, get out there and write your books and go and put me wrong if I'm wrong. This is what I'm wanting.
You can't measure emotion. You can feel it. When someone's upset, when someone's had an argument between the two. A lot of that is psychological cues, as in what you're picking up with body language and stuff. But there is that palpable atmosphere that people exude is the word. Do you know what I mean? So even if they're masking, you can pick it up. That that's happening. We don't know. You can't measure love.
Well, that's it. That was
you can't measure anger. You can't put an equatable scientific explanation to that. You can measure the responses in the brain and stuff like that, and the brain patterns and the blood pressure levels and all that sort of thing. But you can't actually define and equate love or anger.
Well, that's very true. And it's the same with fear as well. If the poltergeist does feed on fear, I mean, we've suggested that it could feed on dormant electricity and it could feed on electrical energy and that sort of stuff. Again, nobody knows. These are just ideas and theories. We're toying with the ideas and playing around with them. Some people might say, oh, well, I think that's rubbish because it will move it on, move it forward. That's brilliant. But as it stands at the moment, when people are talking about poltergeists, it has been documented in the past that it can feed on fear. Again, we mention it. We mention that, but we're not the first people to actually suggest that. We're going on what we've learned from the past. So if it's feeding on fear, when it feeds on fear, as past documented cases have suggested, if you can deal with the fear and your stress and your anxiety, the poltergeist seems to lose its power and then it dwindles away. If in other words, the more frightened you get, the more anxiety that you sort of exude, if that's a good word, the stronger the poltergeist might get. So if it, I've lost my train of thought again. Where was I leading with this?
It's inequatable, isn't it? That's the problem. Is like you can look at cases and you can look at other people's studies of different cases of poltergeist, and you can look at the observable phenomena.
Oh, it's come back to us. Sorry.
Go for it. Go.
No, what I was going to say, if it's right and the poltergeist can feed on fear, then it stands to reason, basically in a nutshell, it becomes patently obvious why a poltergeist might want to precipitate and activate contagion. In other words, the more people it can infect, the more people it can frighten, basically the more energy, food, whatever it is, it's going to get to sustain itself. So in a nutshell, the poltergeist's reason for contagion could quite simply be, if indeed the poltergeist is an external sort of entity with an intelligence, its main reason could be to survive. And everybody's got that survival instinct, haven't they? Everybody wants to survive. It's the survival of the fittest. Why should it be any different for the poltergeist, whatever it is? It's born, it comes into existence, it begins to, they might know that they've got a short shelf life, so they might do everything they can to potentially prolong their lives, like what we do when we take medicine and drugs to like battle off diseases. It wants to survive as long as it can, and so do we. That's the only plausible thing we can think of.
Or it's a feeder.
The more it infects, the more people get frightened, the more basic food it's got for itself. Again, I have to stress, it's just an idea. It's a theory. It's something that we've put down on paper. It's like go away and mull it over and discuss it. If we're completely wrong, that's fine. That's great. We might not be. We might get laughed at for even suggesting the idea that it's an intelligence sort of thing. But that's what it comes across in the book. It's as if it's some sort of external intelligent entity. But
sorry to interrupt, but if it is that, an external entity, could it possibly be an entity that just feeds off of that emotional energy that's been put out there? It feeds off that level of energy, and then once that dissipates, it moves on. So what happens is it's almost like a self-perpetuating circle, because you have the anxiety, you put it's out there because that's what happens, or whatever the circumstances of that emotional discharge, we'll call it, that then gets attached, goes, oh great, causes something to happen, which causes a fear, which then is a self-perpetuating circle. So as you get more worried about, hang on, what's going on, that then feeds on it. It's like, oh great, not meaning to, it's not intelligently creating the fear, but it's just a byproduct of this feed scenario. And then once it it doesn't dissipate, it just moves on because there's a stronger food source elsewhere. Maybe we're looking at this too much as in attachment. Maybe we're just looking at, maybe it's a bit like humans. We find a good source of food, we eat it until it's depleted and move on to another area. That's why farmers have to change fields, isn't it? Because we deplete the ground of nutrients, so they leave a field lying fallow for a little while, so it can replenish itself.
Well, that could be true as well.
Just a thought.
Well,
it was just a thought that came to me while you was talking.
Yeah, sort of like listening to what Darren was saying and what you sort of surmised, Kerry. I mean, perhaps a poltergeist sort of thing is just to be noticed, and that fuels its being, and because hence sort of, even though these can be frightening experience, and nobody's ever really been hurt by one, have they?
There was only one case in the Enfield, I think, where one of the reporters went in, and I think he got hit by a marble.
Yes, on the eyebrow.
On the eyebrow, yeah.
The Lego brick. Yeah.
And if you actually look at the entity case, the lady in question was actually quite severely traumatized and psychologically and physically hurt, wasn't she? But generally the case, it's like that they're normally harmless. And projectiles
in a lot of cases, seem to like go in a weird sort of trajectory. And it's like a glass is flying over, and just before it hits you, it curves around your head. There's a lot of cases like that. But again, you get the exceptions to the rule. I mean, look at South Shields. The guy was slashed to pieces by it.
Yeah,
You know?
yeah, it was.
And there is other cases out there where people do get sort of injured, but in the grand scheme of things, you know, they obviously these are like extreme hauntings, as Paul Adams and Eddie Brazil coined.
Yeah.
In their wonderful book. But like I say, each and every one's different. So,
And again, it's like, exactly, it's not one size fits all, is it?
No, but in the same respect, each and every poltergeist case has got its similarities, and some similarities are more striking than others. You know, and this is another thing we'll look at. We'll look at other cases in and around the world, and we'll think, well, I don't know, the poltergeist in this place did that. This poltergeist did exactly the same. You know, everybody's familiar with the antics of the poltergeist, and everyone's familiar that they've got this repertoire of tricks that they like to do, and which begs the question, like, why do they all do the same thing? Why do they start with a scratching and then progress into knocking, and then things start moving around, and then this happens and that happens, and then fire starting? It's the same bunch of tricks that they've got, but we'll look into that as well, and we'll talk about. Well, I'm not going to go too much into this because this is getting really hairy. We actually make the suggestion. Should I say this? Yes, I'll say it. We actually make the suggestion that every poltergeist that's ever been and ever is and ever was and is ever going to be is not a collection of individual single poltergeists, but one single sort of arc poltergeist, if you know what I mean.
That's the point I was getting at.
Yeah. So in this arc poltergeist, this main parent body has got little tentacles, if you will, that reach off and they go out and they infect. And they could explain why a lot of poltergeist cases are very similar, why some are strikingly similar. And it's potentially because the same guiding hand is behind all of the infestations.
Yeah.
There's a similar sort of theory in regards to like paranormal activity in general, like UFOs are linked to poltergeists are linked to Bigfoot. All that. There's a lot of investigators look into that. But again, it's like we've come up with this poltergeist idea, or a super pult, or whatever it is you want to call it. We've come up with this idea because it's like basically the evidence seems to suggest that this potentially could be the case. Now, there's probably people sitting listening right now. I say right now, not now, right now, because we're recording now, but right now, as in when this is going out now.
Yeah.
Could be sitting thinking, they could fall off their chair laughing and think. But if you stop and just have a think about it, if you think go and buy the book and read it, because the book expresses these opinions a lot better than what I'm doing verbally right now. This is why I like to write books, because I can get stuff far better down on paper than I can speaking it. Because sometimes I mumble and I stutter, and sometimes I forget things and I get nervous, you know, like I was talking about before. Go and get the book and read the book, and then sit and think about it, and then see what you. Because I think it's a jolly good sort of notion, to be honest. Plus, I'm not the only person to think that. There's some praise on the back of the book by some notable researchers who've read the first edition, and they've actually thought, "Goodness me, what a novel idea! This is actually quite interesting, thought-provoking." One individual said, and the same individuals actually turned around and said, well, this is the first time in many, many, many years where someone's actually come up with a theory as to like what it could potentially be. Whether he disagrees with it or agrees with it or not, it's worth looking into. I mean,
like you say, thought-provoking.
Yeah. I mean,
and isn't that what this is about? Because none of us have got the answers.
Well, that's it. When I'm just putting something forward, Mike and I keep saying it's because I've done the update, but essentially both Mike and I wrote this book, so obviously we'll both come up with the idea. I've just took it a little bit further, and I've just like amended the conclusions and stuck some of my own thoughts in. But the idea of an arc poltergeist, one guiding intelligence, one guiding sort of poltergeist with all its tentacles reaching out. And he's saying it could explain.
I'm seeing in my head, I'm seeing. Sorry to interrupt. In my head, I'm seeing. Have you seen Stranger Things?
Me? No.
Yeah.
What's it
No,
now?
I haven't seen it.
You haven't seen it? It's a series on Netflix, and part of that is like, they call it the Upside Down, which is like this other world that like mirrors our world, but is a lot darker. And in there, it's like an entity that lives. Now, he has like lots of tendrils that go out, and it turns into like a tunnel system underneath the town. And it's fascinating. But in my head, I've got that entity in my head. So anybody who's watching has watched Stranger Things, then probably know.
It's a similar sort of concept, isn't it?
It's falling on deaf ears with these two because they haven't seen it, folks.
I don't know what you mean. But when was this program put out? When was it made? Do you know?
Oh God, it's a couple of years ago now, if not longer than that. Go check it out. It's still on Netflix.
Because at least I can then go back to the 2014 edition of the first book and say, well, if people say, well, he's pinching them ideas, he's just taking the concept off the television and applying it to the poltergeist. No,
that's not what I was suggesting.
No, I'm not saying you're suggesting that, but people might suggest that. I know how cynical some people are. But if we go back to 2014, way before this program was probably made.
Oh yeah.
It was, definitely.
There's a published there as well. You know?
Yeah. You're well original, darling. Don't you worry about that.
Good. Even if it turns out to be a whole load of crock, you know, at least then I can turn around and say, well, at least I've had a go. You know, it might be a load of rubbish, but then again, there just might be something in it. You just don't know.
I think you're underestimating. But you're underestimating yourself there by saying that. You're saying, oh, it could be a load of crock, you know, whatever. You could think it's bunkum. At the end of the day, you're thinking, you're researching, you're looking at, like you say, you don't fit your hypothesis. You don't make a hypothesis and then go and find the facts because you just lend yourself to confirmation bias there. You're looking at all different cases and all different things that have happened, witnessed, documented things that have happened, and then making a hypothesis off the back of it, which is what you're supposed to do, right?
Yeah. Basically,
isn't that what you're supposed to do?
A potential working scenario.
Yeah.
Then has an idea, go and play with it.
Exactly.
Go and you know, make a
brainstorm it. See where you go with it yourselves. You know what I mean? Darren's done a hell of a lot of back work on this. He's read. How many cases have you back read on this?
Oh goodness me, the amount of poltergeist books I've written on it. When I was looking for cases that involved instances of contagion, I've read lots of books, but not all cases experience contagion. Some of them do, some of them don't. You know, but I've managed to find a good selection of cases where that's clear contagion, like the Mayanup case in 1955 in Australia. Australia, on the other side of the blooming world, in 1955, all those years ago. That was wrote up in a book by Paul Cropper and Tony Healy called Australian Poltergeist. Wow, what a book that is. That is absolutely fantastic. And when I read that from cover to cover, not just because I'm looking for contagion examples, because I'm genuinely interested in poltergeists, but when I was reading through it, in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, is there anything in this text that could indicate that a little bit of contagions occurred? Even it might not be noted, it might not be noted as contagion as such, but and then I found some brilliant examples. So in the Mayanup case, 1955 to 1957, I think it was, they identify contagion, even though they don't use the word contagion. I think they use words like it. What was it say? I've got it written down somewhere. I can't remember what it was. It extended its activities across the road. That's how they've put it. And as soon as I wrote that, I thought, I've hit the jackpot. Yeah, and as it turns out, over the road turned out to be relations of the family at Ground Zero. And when the family at Ground Zero started experiencing their poltergeist, they're called the Krakoas. That's the name of the family. They used to babysit at Ground Zero in the early stages of the poltergeist. They used to look after the kids, and the family used to go. And he used to spend the night there. And Paul Cropper and Tony Healy make a phrase which says, and which just nails it right on the head. And it says something in the lines of, you know, the good deeds looking after the family ended them up in a whole heap of trouble as the poltergeist latched onto them and went across into their house. And I'm thinking that is stage 1 Contagion without a doubt. And I was over the moon when I found that. So I've wrote that entire case up, and I've put that one in as well. And it's
you can see the little happy dance he's done about that, can't you? Even now.
So what you're sort of do you think the Poltergeist, call them Poltergeist, do you think it could possibly be looking for a new host? It realises its short longevity, if there's such a word, and it's constantly sort of putting tentacles out from around where it is at present to try and find a new host.
Well, it could be. I mean, there's even talk about switching focuses in the book as well. Alan Gold, in his book Poltergeist, he makes mention of something similar. He says he couldn't tell if there was 2 focuses or if there was just one, or if it was 2 different poltergeists. And my brain's working overtime, and I'm thinking, well, perhaps it was just one poltergeist and it was just reaching out and infecting people. That could be like a little clue here. But then in this particular mine-up case, the poltergeist did apparently stop in these 2 houses, and it seemed to be able to switch focus. So I've raised that question as well. Can a poltergeist switch its focus? If a poltergeist can switch focus, then potentially that could potentially explain Contagion, because it's went from one person to somebody else. But when you get Contagion, if I go away and experience Contagion in my house, it won't last long and it won't be as intense. And it always seems to peter out and go back to ground zero. And another thing that's been noticed as well is when Contagion's occurring in another person's house, the activity at ground zero doesn't stop either. You know what I mean?
Right.
So there's essentially, it's happening at ground zero here, and it's happening quite intense. But the poltergeist Contagion, its site B is mild, it's diluted, but then it fizzles off as if it's like sort of weans its way back to ground zero. That was another, again, Healy and Cropper note that in their book.
Yeah.
They actually said something in the lines of, when the poltergeist extended its activities, lots more stone throwing was occurred and bricks and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But it was limited to that, whereas back at ground zero, they did make a point and say, well, the activity, it's important to note that they said the activity continued at ground zero, and that had more activity going on there. There was matter through matter and penetration where things, like when objects go through solid objects. And there was other things.
Yeah.
But when the Contagion was going on at the Krakoa's house, that was just mainly stone throwing. And again, efforts were made to try and locate a stone thrower throughout the whole investigation. Nobody was found. They did all-night watches. The little galvanized shacks that they were living in at the time were being pelted with bricks, and there was people out there looking, and there was nobody out there. But there was even claims of bricks and rocks being actually seen materializing out of thin air and falling onto the roof, falling onto the house. But they said they were falling in weird trajectories as well, and they were falling slower than what a normal brick would fall, as if someone threw it normally. Never mind my book. Go and buy Australian Poltergeist. It is a fantastic.
I'll have to
that sounds fascinating.
Actually, can I take that back? Buy my book as well.
Well, I've always bought your book, so you're safe on that one.
But Australian Poltergeist is a great book. In fact, all the books that I read on Poltergeist, I would recommend. Find them, dig them out. The information is out there. If anybody doubts what I'm saying in my book, I mean, I've sourced it. I've even put the page numbers in. There's a bibliography at the back. Some of the information I've got out of the Journal of the Society for Psychical Research, peer-reviewed academic stuff. And there's people making remarks about virus-style activity and how it's moved from the... So it has been noted. I'm not original in saying this. I'm just getting a hold of the information, trying to take it forward, and then saying to the real experts out there, look, this is what I've gathered. Nobody's looked into this before. Please, off you go and argue about it for the next 40 years.
Yeah, beautiful.
So that's the whole point of this book.
So do you find Contagion can happen right at the start of a poltergeist case? Can you get Contagion instances happening away from the thing, or does it tend to happen as as the activities come into a climax, sort of later on, sort of and at the host location, you start getting contagion, or is it something that sort of happens as it's tailing off from
Well,
ground zero?
that's an interesting question, but it's also we have actually thought of that. That's discussed in the book as well, where we're talking about the active and the passive contagion, and this is when we're trying to get to grips with what type of contagion is, and we're looking at, well, if it's passive, then it must mean that. If it's active from the start, it must mean this, and then we're going to look at it, and basically we'll come to the conclusion that either active and passive contagion work concurrently from the outset, or it's just active contagion altogether. We've decided that passive contagion is out of the equation.
Right.
But you'll have to read the book, because there's so many words in the book and there's so much to think about, and it's just hard to like bring it all to the surface here and remember everything I've wrote. Sometimes I've got to read the books myself before I do things like this. I'll make me notes and I'll read what I've written up as well, in an effort to try and not trip up over myself, if you know what I mean. I don't want to accidentally misquote myself and have someone say, yeah, you're contradicting yourself. Yeah, I want to get, so if I can't answer a question, I'm going to say, well, I can't answer that at this precise moment because this is the reason why. I didn't want to trip myself up, in other words, not because I'm lying or I'm making it up. It's because I want to try and get an honest sort of.
Oh, I get what you're saying.
You know what I mean? You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
I've had a lot of stuff to grapple with and think about.
Yeah.
And if and when you read the book, you'll see just how much information and how much thoughts went in.
Yeah.
It's just one of the reasons why I kind of get anxious when I do these things as well, because I've been subject to so much aggravation and grief and attack in the past before. And I don't want to leave myself open for any more, because it's like I've just about had enough of it, you know. But I think I'm going to get quite a bit when this book comes out. And
I doubt it, actually, because I think the thing is, I think when you research a project and you're knee deep in research, you bombarded yourself with a hell of a lot of information, and you collate that information and you put it out into a book or a blog or a show that we do. And then if someone asks you about it later, you can't always recall all the details of that. That doesn't mean to say you haven't done the work. It just means that, you know, once it's done, you kind of bubble it up and put it to one side, and it's done, and you've put it out there, and that's it. I've always said my ability to retain information is awful.
Well, let me take you and give you an example of, and this is like a movie example. This is great. I love this. And this illustrates my point to a T. You ever seen Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade?
Yes.
Yeah, with Sean Connery and Harrison Ford.
Yeah.
Well, it revolves around this diary, doesn't it?
Yes.
That Sean Connery's made. What's his name? Henry Senior. He's got all these notes about how to find the Holy Grail or whatever it is they're looking for, and then it goes missing. He ends up, because he puts it in an envelope and he mails it to Harrison Ford, doesn't he?
Yeah.
Right? And then Harrison Ford somehow brings the diary back with him back into Germany or whatever. And the diary goes missing anyway. And there's some vital information in this diary. And Harrison Ford's saying, right, we need the next bit of information to get through this. What is it? And he goes, well, I don't know it. It's in my diary. He said, well, can you not remember it? Can you not remember it? And then Sean Connery says, right, well, I actually put it in the diary so I didn't have to remember it.
Yes.
Which is a great sort of, I was going to try and do this in a Sean Connery voice, but that's not, I don't believe I just did that. I basically put it in the diary so he didn't have to remember it. So basically I write me notes, I put things down in books, I put things down on paper. It's a lot of information. And it's hard to remember everything. And sometimes you get asked questions and you get put on the spot and you've got to be able to talk your way around it.
Yeah.
You know? So I would suggest buy the book, read it from cover to cover, every last single word. I'm hoping that people will enjoy it and take something from it. If they're not going to do anything with it, that's great, as long as they enjoy it. If they think it's a thought-provoking, wow, that's interesting. Some people might want to take the ideas forward and write their own papers and other books, and they might say, well, you know, Ritson 2021 said this, such and such, blah, blah, blah. But I would disagree, because that's great, fine. Disagree with me as much as you like. take it forward. That's all I want, you know.
And that's the point of this field. It's getting that brainstorming going. It's that thought provocation. What's that word, Richard?
Provoking.
Yeah, well, we'll go with provoking. Yeah, you know, that is what will push the field forward. That will, theories and concepts and ideas, you know, only come from, you know, looking at the work that's been done. And like you say, put it to the academics. They have, you know, do you ever come across this before? Can you guide me in the right direction for some reading material, whatever? They'll happily do that, because they see that you're trying to progress yourself and you're not just arguing for the sake of arguing. And this is what makes this field what it is, not the ghost hunting community that spend time bickering it and arguing about, oh gosh, some of the silly things that they're arguing about. It's this work. That's the integral part of the paranormal community. That's the bit that I am interested in, not the peripheral,
the serious side,
not the hobbyists.
Yeah, the serious side, not the entertainment side, not the ghost nights, not the thrill nights. As fun as they can be, everybody loves to be scared.
I love that. Yeah.
I mean, I've done plenty of that in the past, not as an entertainment, but like, you know, I've found ghost hunts in castles and spooky dungeons and stately hunts. I found that to be quite thrilling, and you do get a buzz, and you can come out after something's occurred, and you think, oh, like a cigarette, I'm like, oh, that was great. Oh, wow. Oh, what a buzz that was. It was great. You know what I mean? But like, 12 hours in a place in the night, through the night, it's not tantamount to serious research, is it? It's just getting a buzz, you know. Mind if you spend 12 hours in that place 3 times a week for 2 years, then it might become interesting when you start looking at bigger picture and collating all the data. This is what I'm trying to do. I mean, I have to say as well, I'm doing my best here for being, I'm a layman, yeah. I never went to university. I'm not an academic in any way, shape or form. I've never professed to be an academic. You know, this is why I say this is what I've done. Off you go, you know, there you go, academics. What can you do with this? You know? Honestly,
it is. That's the point, isn't it? I'm not an academic. I work in a shop during the day. Do you know what I mean? But this is something that I can, you know, it gives me, it inspires me. It gives me thought patterns, and I've gone down so many rabbit holes because of the paranormal field that I would never have thought I would do if I'd lived a normal life. You know what I mean? If I just focused on, it's just amazing.
I think to myself, sometimes I think because I'm just an average Joe on the street, I'd hate to be considered to be one of the idiots out there that's runs around ghosts, and I'm trying not to be. But in the same respect, because I haven't got letters after my name and I'm not academic and I'm not academically trained, it's a case of like, well, I don't know, maybe if I could go back in time, maybe I should have went to university. Maybe if I'd got my PhD, or if I'd went on to become, who knows what I might have achieved. I think I've missed something here, to be honest. But I'd like to think.
Just because you haven't got a piece of paper that says you've got a degree or whatever, doesn't mean to say that the work you're doing is not relevant.
Well, that's true.
It's just as relevant. True. I mean, I talked to my sister who's got a psychology degree. Yeah, I was talking to her, and she said that you could pass that exam no problem with just your general knowledge base. It's just how you formulate it. That's all it is. She said just because you haven't got the piece of paper doesn't mean you haven't got the knowledge.
Yeah.
Well, do you know what I mean? So I don't dismiss what you do and what you've done because of that. That annoys me, actually.
Yeah.
Just because you haven't got an official piece of paper that says you passed this academic exam. Fantastic. Good for those who've done that. I didn't get that opportunity when I was younger. You know, I'm a normal, everyday kind of girl. That doesn't mean to say I'm less intelligent than other people out there. It just means that my life took a different turn. I utilise that in a different way now.
That's the way I'd like people to think about what I've done, basically. In a way, it's like I mean, as much as I respect academia and they're all really clever people.
Yeah.
I would like to think that like I could be an example of like, well, at least not all those enthusiasts of the paranormal, they're not all, how am I going to put this with you? You know, they're not all into entertainment. They're not all into just running around in the dark. Some people who aren't technically acting, they are, see, the South Shields case fell in my lap. right? I was lucky enough to know enough about poltergeists, or at least I wasn't stupid enough to think, oh, this is going to be great, let's exploit the family, whatever. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Mike had been around the block, like I say, for a few years. So we were both clued up, if you know what I mean. Seasoned, call it that way. And yeah, people may turn around and say, well, what qualifications you got and what experience you got. Well, to be honest, no disrespect to the academics, yeah, but a large percentage of the academics, a large percentage of them, I've probably got more experience in the field than they have, because they're at their universities doing their papers and doing this, that, and t'other. Whereas I've actually had a poltergeist case that lasted almost a year. I was in the thick of it for a year. And a lot of these people, I think they need to get out into the big wide world, and they need to get into the thick of a case. And a lot of these skeptical parapsychologists, which is a few out there, some more skeptical than others, and some real die-hard skeptics who are like, they will not, under any circumstances, sort of entertain the idea. They're the ones that the poltergeist needs to bite on their backside and say, yeah, you know, they need to be in the thick of it. They need to see coins materializing in the air, toys being thrown around, doors slamming, somebody being cut. They need to see that firsthand. So that's my message. Get out there and get a good case for yourself.
But they don't fall in everybody's laps, and they're not that easy to come by, let's be honest.
True. That's
they're not around every corner, Darren, you know. I mean, I've been doing this quite a while, and I've never seen a real live and kicking poltergeist case. I'd love to, but I've never come across one.
Just edit that bit out.
Will do.
But again,
I kind of anomalous phenomena, which it comes under that anomalous phenomena. You do need a balanced viewpoint of what that could be. Not overly hard skeptic, not overly hard believer. You need that balanced perspective, and you need to go in and observe and question, just talk and listen and document. And that's the key. You're not, there are many explanations, many different theories as to what it could be caused, whether it's a psychological thing, whether it's an externalization of an internal process from people being the actual person who's creating the phenomena, to, it's an actual spirit coming in and utilizing that energy, or even an entity in itself that's maybe feeding on the energy. We don't know. But if you go in with that, no, that's nothing, you've got to be broad-minded. You've got to expand your thought processes and explore different avenues, just like Darren and Mike Hallowell did and have done, and reach out to people if you don't know the answers, because somebody else out there might be like, no, you're okay, you're doing fine, you don't want to cause more damage than the poltergeist is actually causing in the first place, right?
Yeah. Bang on. Absolutely bang on. And again, that's what we've tried to do. Again, I say we're not being. I don't mean to take anything away from these academics. Honestly, I think there's some real nice
phenomenal
people in the paranormal world, and there are academics, and we've got lots of friends within this field. And I'm proud to be able to say that a lot of these academic people know who I am, and they've patted me on the back and they've said, "Look, job well done." You know what I mean? You've actually proved that there is people out there who can actually. They've got a bit of nous, they've got a bit of clout, and they can investigate and they can do a good job without being. See, I don't need a PhD to be able to see a bed turn over by itself. I've seen that bed turn over. I've seen the cupboard fall over. I've seen the coins materializing. Right? I didn't have to go to university for 6-10 years or whatever to be able to say, well, that happened, because I've seen it. I can't prove it happened, but I do my best. But to the day from now to the day I take my last breath, you will never, ever convince me that poltergeists are not real. And I've mentioned this in the book. I've actually said, when I've talked about the skeptics, I've said, we know poltergeist can do this and it can do that. And I don't know if it's RSPK, and it could be this and it could be that. What I can't tell you is, I can't tell you what the poltergeist is, but I can tell you what it isn't. And I've said something in the lines of, it isn't delusion. It isn't all made up. It isn't all mass collaboration. It isn't all misinterpretation. It's not all this. The true poltergeist is, something that is real. And it's in one day, it could actually be you on the backside, you know, and God help you if it does, because they're serious, man. They cause havoc, nightmare, turmoil, and not just in an emotional way. Psychologically, they can just mess you up completely. So I feel sorry for anybody who gets a genuine poltergeist case and who's genuinely affected by it, because these diehard skeptics who say you're stupid, you made it up, you're lying, right? That irritates the living out of me, you know,
On
because
that
I've
note,
seen and I've been and I've seen and I've done it.
on that note, we are actually drawing to the end of the show. Where can people tell people again, because fascinating concept. I can't personally wait to get my hands on this book. I pre-ordered it. I'm waiting for it to land on my mat, and then I'm going to devour that. Where can people get it? Tell people again where they can buy your books.
Well, the best place you can get at the time of recording this now, it's pre-order, and you can get it on Amazon. If you just go onto my Amazon page, or if you Google Poltergeist Parallels and Contagion, you'll find it on most shops actually at the minute online. You can pre-order it there. It will be filtering down into the stores eventually, and I do believe it's $12.99 for the paperback and $7.99 for the Kindle. And it's published by White Crow Books, and it's out on the 26th. So by the time you're listening to this now, it should be available. So please, if you go and get it, enjoy it and take it forward. That's all I ask.
Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us in the studio today. It's been an absolute pleasure speaking to you again, and so thought-provoking, and I love that. I love people that can make me think, and you certainly do bring that to the table for me, and hopefully a load of other people out there as well. Richard, last thoughts?
Last thoughts, fascinating show. I mean, you know, and I'm with you, Kerry. I will be ordering the book, and yes, just waiting for it to come through. You know, at first, when I knew we were going to have Darren on and talking about Contagion, I did sort of scratch my head and say, what's this all about? But now I've got a lot better understanding, and to look at Poltergeist from a slightly different angle in future.
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you so much again for joining us in the studio. Guys out there, if you want any more from the Paranormal Concept Show, our back catalogue and all of our blogs are out there on paranormalconcept.com, and you can also buy our books. They're on there too. On that note, thank you again, and we'll see you next time. Goodbye. Say goodbye, guys.
Goodbye.
Thank you very much. Goodbye. Thank you.